Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody. Mark and Steve on the PBSE podcast. This is episode 192. And we haven't talked about something like this for quite a long time, I think. And you'll see by the question on the episode title, should I marry my porn addicted fiancé or move on?
That's not a scary title at all.
No, that's not a scary title at all.
You can tell it's going to be a very gentle, very chill episode today.
Oh, yes. Well, this actually came in from a PBSE listener, and we're going to read what she sent us, and then we're going to jump in and see if we can address this. She said, "Hi, I really appreciate this podcast and what it offers. As a partner of a porn addict, it gives me valuable insight on what we are both going through. I've been with my boyfriend for 6 years. About 3 years ago, I found out about his addiction, and it's been an uphill battle ever since. All of this has been heartbreaking, to say the least, and I've been trying to make sense of the deep betrayal and hurt. About 3 months ago, I finally asked him to put accountability software on his device and regularly talk to an accountability partner. He also has content and website restrictions on his phone. Since then, there have been 3 to 4 times I've found that he has looked up pornography on his device or worked a way around the accountability software. Despite this, I see real progress from him. He was almost 3.5 weeks sober just recently. I believe it happens much less often, and I genuinely believe he is trying. However, I am defeated because he has told me he slipped up again. I have given him so much grace and understanding despite my deep hurt and pain, and I'm becoming increasingly more frustrated and heartbroken every time this happens. Being with someone for 6 years, I've been ready to get serious and start a life with him. But every time this happens, I feel like we're taking more and more steps backward. How do we end this toxic cycle, reclaim our relationship, and finally move forward? Or do I need to be more realistic and end this relationship as he is too deep in his addiction? Thank you for any insight."
Well, first of all, I think we just want to applaud this partner for writing in, and we appreciate you listening to the podcast, and we're glad that you found it helpful. So thank you for the kind words. I told Mark when we were going through potential submissions, to select from for the podcast this week, and when we were going through this one, the very first thing that I told him as we were getting into production today before we started was, this is like me and Brittany.
Yeah.
This is the Steve and Brittany story. And so I wanted to kind of kick today off with just a quick iteration of that. Some of you may have heard this, but I can really, my heart really goes out to this spouse. I mean, it's like talking to a mirror from 10 years ago, honestly. The real quick recap of my story, beginning with my marriage. I had a history with addiction prior to that, but After I got married, I was open with my wife about my struggles with pornography. We had no idea, my wife and I, to be fair, what we were dealing with fully, but she was aware of what was going on, and like many, I had bought into the fallacy that getting married and being able to have real sex was going to solve my problem, and of course that didn't happen. And as we went through the process of my addiction kind of began rearing its head more and more, Brittany and I got into a very toxic pattern, and it sounds eerily similar to what is going on here. At the beginning, I was very highly motivated to really work on this and change. I didn't want to hurt my wife. I didn't want to be bringing this issue into our marriage that had plagued me for so long. I really wanted to change and become different. However, the reality is, looking back, and I'm able to admit this now, as time went on, Brittany was incredibly supportive with me in my addiction. When I would have slips or relapses, she was my biggest cheerleader. She was my biggest champion. She was always the one who was willing to be there for me and try to love me through it and help in any way that she could. But I had two things going on for me. One, my wife's love in that way, because of the way she was loving me, and it was coming from a healthy, loving place for her. I unfortunately was taking advantage of that and was using that as enablement. And when things would become difficult for us, we fell into what I would call a reactive recovery pattern, which is very similar to what we're hearing here. I would make serious efforts when I could tell that Brittany was becoming especially hurt or wounded by my actions and addiction. That's when I would get serious for a week or a month, maybe two. I'd take some sort of token effort. There were a couple of times where I went to see a therapist, like one time, or tried different things. And even though those efforts, there was a degree of sincerity behind them, the reality is that, like many who struggle with addiction, and I suspect that's part of what's going on here, even though there was a part of me that wanted to change, I wasn't yet ready to give up everything that I needed to give up and sacrifice what needed to be sacrificed to really change. I was comfortable for where I was, and I didn't want to face all of the issues behind addiction. I was scared, I was ambivalent, and I was cowardly. And as I look back on that, this kind of pattern continued to a point that kind of started to reach a critical mass, which is where I kind of perceived this partner may be at. One day, I remember where all this culminated was I was at work. I remember right where I was at the place of work I was at that point. I was so deep in my addiction and so deep in the hypocrisy of it that I was actually a therapist helping other addicts. I was running an addiction recovery program for chemical addiction. I'd gotten done just meeting with a client about some stuff. We'd had a really good session. And 5 minutes after they walked out the door, I pulled up pornography on my office computer and masturbated. That's how deep into this I was. I mean, I was really living a double life. And I called my wife on my lunch break because that was our agreement. I was going to be honest and open with her. And that was me doing kind of the bare minimum. And I expected Brittany to do the usual, I call it the waltz, that we usually did at this point. I would get honest, express remorse like a lost puppy dog, hold my eyes in shame. Brittany would then step in, be my cheerleader, say, "Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for telling me. We've got this. We can beat this. I know we can do it. I know you can do it." And I would go on, and then I'd probably relapse again fairly soon. And that was kind of the pattern we'd done for years and years and years. And on that particular day, Brittany broke the waltz. She broke the dance that we'd done for years. And after I told her what had happened, rather than playing her usual role, she deviated in a really scary way. She got really emotional and she started to cry. And she told me essentially what this spouse is vocalizing in this letter. "Steve, I'm not telling you that I need to leave today, and I'm not telling you that I need to leave tomorrow, but I am telling you that I can't continue to do this. And we are getting to a point where you're going to have to choose this life that you're living, or you're going to have to choose something different. You keep saying that you're going to do something different. You keep saying that you're going to get serious about this, but we've been doing it that way for years now, and it's not changing. It's not getting better. If anything, it might be getting worse in some ways, not necessarily with sobriety, but in terms of, all of the other things that kind of accompany this. And I can't keep doing this forever." And it was a horrible day, but it was an important day because it was the beginning of a change for my wife and I. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, why that was a change and why that was important with the honesty piece and all that. But I just really resonate with this couple because it sounds like they are in a very similar pattern. This guy, I don't know him at all, but if he's like many of the men that Mark and I have worked with over the years, what it sounds like is this is a guy who to some degree does want this, but to a large degree isn't willing to do the work yet, or is not yet in a place where he is willing to sacrifice and do what is really necessary to make a change. And the reasons behind that are complex, and we're not going to cover those in the podcast today for sake of time. But what we do want to do is get into giving some advice to this amazing partner who is dealing with this pain, give some advice to this addict partner and a starting point, and give a recommendation about what needs to happen next. So we'll kind of tie in with that story as we go along here.
Yeah. And I could so relate to this situation because my situation was similar in my early marriage as well. And what I'm seeing here is this, as you said, Steve, in your story and mine too, this guy really seems to be in a reactive, pain-averse approach to so-called recovery or sobriety.
The bare minimum to keep things going along, right?
Yeah. How do I keep her around? How do I keep her from, calling this off?
Absolutely.
And it's very reactive in that you wait for her to get upset again, things to kind of reach a crescendo. You do some efforts like, getting accountability software or an internet filter, and then things sort of calm down, and you just sort of base what you're doing being reactive to how upset she is, as opposed to being proactive and leading out and being all in, right? And doing real recovery. That's kind of what I see. He's not there at this point.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so there's no plan, there's no structure, there's not nearly enough accountability. He's trying to do this on his own, which you and I are very familiar with, right?
Absolutely. And let's talk about that for a second, because I am passionate about that. And I'm hoping that this addict partner will hear us, because we've been him in many ways. Every addict that we work with, every guy that ever has come into my office has a set of reasons why they aren't willing to reach out to other people, right? Why they don't want to reach out. Sometimes it's bravado. Sometimes it's machismo. Sometimes it's good old-fashioned pride. Sometimes it's not wanting to admit weakness. Sometimes it's shame. Usually it's a combination of all of those. But at the end of the day, for me, the popular excuse that I would lead with is, "Hun, I don't need help. I'm a therapist. I help other people do this. Don't tell me to go get help. I am the help. I don't need help." Right. But everybody has reasons for it, right? Yeah. But what it boils down to at the end of the day is a willingness to be open to looking at the evidence as it stands. And what we are looking at here, just like my wife lovingly pointed out to me, I want to lovingly speak to this partner right now and say, you have a minimum of 3 years of evidence to look at. Can you really say that this is getting better? Can you really say that you're doing everything that you could be doing? Can you really say that you're getting uncomfortable and you're working to become the person that this partner of yours deserves, that she wants to sign up for in the long term? I don't think I would be pretty confident, knowing very little about this guy, admittedly, that the answer after 3 years of such little progress, that one could honestly look in the mirror and say that's the case.
Because she says after she found out about his addiction 3 years ago, it's been an uphill battle.
Yes.
Since.
Well, and look at the language. You and I talked about this beforehand, going back to what you said, Mark, about this being a reactive recovery. Notice what she wrote in. I was the one who said you need to get accountability software here, right? I was the one who finally said you need to find an accountability partner. You can see there's this pattern of this spouse from a loving place of wanting to make this relationship work and find happiness here, of taking the charge, right? And leading out. And I will tell you, Mark and I care about everybody listening to this too much. We've talked about this before. We will talk about it again. When partners come into our offices, you know what the number one cause of a partner wanting to be done and needing to be done in any relationship is? Guess what? It isn't the acting out. That's the case sometimes. And God knows that acting out will get you there eventually.
Yes.
The thing that will kill the relationship much quicker than that is this dynamic that's going on in this relationship right now. It's a partner who over time becomes so exhausted because they are putting in more effort and leading the charge on his battle, on his fight, that eventually those spouses wake up one day, and it's not because they don't leave because they hate him. They don't leave because they don't want to be with him. They leave because they can't stay. It's too much. It's too much work. It's too much effort. They don't have a partner. As one spouse lovingly put it to me, Steve, we have 5 kids together, but I feel like personally I actually have 6. That's what kills the relationship every single time.
Yeah, and we have, you and I, we jotted down as we got ready for this today, Steve, kind of our rules around this kind of thing, which comes from our crazy personal experience, but also decades of working with people all over the world in this stuff. Rule number 1 for the partners of an addict: never, never, never work harder on his recovery than he is willing to work.
Ever. That is an absolute rule in recovery. It's like the law of gravity. You never violate that rule. Anytime you are working harder than your partner in this process, I don't care what the circumstances, you are doing it wrong.
Right. Keeping track of him, playing policewoman, looking at his accountability reports, seeing if I don't know that this is true, but it appears that she's checking in on his internet use, and she's discovered his slips because she can see it on the reports in the software.
Absolutely.
There's another example. Rule number 2, loving him into changing will never work.
Ever.
Oh my gosh, did my wife try to love Mark into changing?
Both of our wives. And you know what? Just like we talked about, guess what that almost did? That was almost the thing that ended both of our marriages.
Yes.
That killing yourself to try to get him to change, that's what makes the spouse wake up one day and just know they have to leave. And they don't. That
was the night that my wife, we're sitting in the car, and I'd had another big binge, and I was in victim mode and whining and complaining. And she finally looked at me and she said, and I'll never forget this, she said, "I just don't think I can love you the way you've become.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore." And actually that night I came very close to taking my own life because I was
at a low point,
devastated and so hopeless from this crazy addiction. But I had been going it alone for probably 15 years.
Yep.
Not 3, 15.
And I was at 10.
And you were at 10. I mean, look
actually,
at that.
I was 20 if you count pre-marriage.
Oh, well, yeah. I wasn't counting pre-marriage. I was probably more like 10 years into my marriage. I was still doing it by myself.
Yeah.
She was exhausted. She was just done, right? She tried to love me for a decade into changing, and she couldn't.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Rule number 3. Real and lasting sobriety and recovery is never. Man, we're using a lot of nevers here, aren't we?
And evers, because I'm going to say an ever in just a second.
We're like, we never say those words. Well, we do on these rules.
Yep.
Real and lasting sobriety and recovery is never passive.
Ever.
Internet filters and accountability software do not a recovery program make.
No, they don't.
They're a nice little helpful, quite frankly, pretty small piece of the puzzle. Recovery is about internal change, not about external fences and forces and whatever, right?
Yes.
And so, recovery cannot be passive. It never works. And the fact that this guy's been at it for 3 years shows you.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, and that kind of takes us to the last statement that we would say, and we're just saying this because we love you. We're going to give this addict partner the message that both of us wish we'd gotten earlier, and that somebody had been direct with both of us enough to have saved us and our spouses some unnecessary heartbreak. The reality is, in this case, as with most cases, with a guy who is this deep into addiction, with this long of a profile and a history, and with such a long demonstrated time of half-hearted, half-assed, or ineffective recovery, whichever of those it is, maybe it's a mix of all three. We don't know this guy, so we can't speak to that. It is clear that this guy is not going to be able to do this alone.
No.
It's clear. There are at least 3 years of evidence to back that up. It's empirical evidence, right? We're looking at it. As my wife told me, here we are. You've been doing this for 3 years on your terms. Your terms suck.
Yeah.
Right? That's what Steve had to come to the realization. Remember my excuse? I'm a therapist. I got this. Guess what? At the time, I was pretty damn good at helping other people get better. You know how good I was at my own recovery? I sucked at it. Sucked.
Right.
My plan worked really well for other people, but trying to apply it through my own line of thinking, my own justifications, my own thinking errors was garbage.
Yeah.
I needed outside help. And
Well,
this guy does too.
And it's really, man, if this guy's listening or other addicts, we know that this is like a butt kicking, and we're not trying to come down on you. We're really,
no, not at
we
all.
want every guy struggling with pornography and sexual addiction to really open your mind and heart to hear us. We are trying desperately right now, as we're talking to all of you, to save you from a ton of grief and pain and frustration and disappointment and failure. We are. What we're saying is, please, please, please don't do it the way we did. Do not go this alone any longer. Please don't extend this crazy, painful journey out longer than it needs to be. Please reach out for help. Please go from me to we.
Yes.
Right? Don't do it like we did. It was hell for
Mark
us and our spouses.
Absolutely. I mean, Mark and I, we, years ago when we first started our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples, it was in its early stages, we came up with a number of marketing campaigns, and I'm going to share one with you now because it was true then and it's true now. To everyone who is considering getting help, but you're on the fence for some reason, don't reinvent the wheel. The Dare to Connect program, for example, Mark and I both have full practices with long waiting lists. Our Dare to Connect program that's been going for 2 years now provides the opportunity to work with 2 therapists both live and through on-demand content for 25 hours a month for the cost of a couple of therapy sessions. Yeah. It provides everything from accountability to a community where you can get better, to a place where you can ask questions and get answers, to a place where you can have access to 2 guys who have already invented that wheel. We've already done that. Don't make the mistake that we did. That's why we created that program in the first place.
Yeah.
Is because there's no need for you all to have to reinvent that. Mark and I, we say often, one of our claims to fame, whatever that fame may look like, big or small, is that I'm the first to tell you, I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. I'm a certified partner trauma therapist. I'm a certified multiple addictions therapist. I've got lots of letters behind my name. You want to know why people come to see me? It's not because of any of those things. Just like I don't think that's the reason why they come to see Mark, is because of the letters behind his name. They come to see us because we're experts in this, but we're not experts because of all of our training. You know why we're experts? Because we did it all the crappy ways first.
It's true.
We did it all the wrong ways.
It's true.
We literally followed, we created the plan of how to do this wrong and almost end your marriage. That should be the title of our next book. Yeah. How to almost end your marriage.
Yeah, I actually did it. The plan to bring yourself where you're sitting in your garage with a gun at your head, ready to pull the trigger.
I mean, that's really what you could title it. And we really are begging and pleading with you, please. We have created a program for you. If you are in a place where you are kind of in this process, but kind of not. If you find yourself like this addict, we are pleading with you, please don't fence sit anymore. There was not a program like Dare to Connect around when Mark and I went through this. Frankly, there's no other program we're aware of that's like it. For the amount of content that we provide, for the price that we offer it at, we created this program. Yes, do we want to make a living on it? Absolutely. Yes, do we want to provide for our families? Absolutely. You know why Mark and I do this? Trust me, being a therapist, anyone who will tell you, it is, if you do it for the paycheck, you are in the wrong line of work. That is not why you do it. We do this because we're passionate about it. We do this because we don't want to see people suffer that same way. If you are in a place where you've been fence sitting, please stop. Grab a 2-week free trial at daretoconnectnow.com. Come join us. Come figure out how you can level this up. We're growing by leaps and bounds. This last month was the fastest growing month we've had so far. We anticipate that to continue. Please come join us. Level things up. And again, you can find info at that at daretoconnectnow.com. But as we're talking about that, it's not just about finding a program like Dare to Connect. This is about this guy Mark and I can connect with where this guy is at. And we really do applaud you for this. This partner mentions in her letter that he's made a lot of progress, and we honor that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know how hard it is to make that limited progress on your own. The problem is not you. As we tell a lot of the guys that we work with in this program in Dare to Connect, this is not always about trying harder. It might just be about trying smarter. Half the problem is you're probably trying to go into the field of battle against a Gatling gun, and you're walking out there with a butter knife, and you wonder why you get cut in half every time. You don't have the tools. You don't have the knowledge base, and you will keep failing. not because you're a bad guy or because you're weak. It may just because you don't have what you need to be able to combat this. So whatever it is, whether it's dare to connect, whether it's whatever it is, we would implore you, don't let your relationship, and not just your partner, yourself, you deserve better than to be sitting in that place of suffering day after day, week after week. Mark and I have been there. You are better than that.
Yeah.
You deserve more.
Yeah, I love all that. And I wanted to say something really quick to this couple. I will tell you that when my wife and I got married, I drug my porn and sex addiction into the marriage. And I did, unlike Steve, I did not tell her. I kept it secret. And here's what I thought. This marriage will solve my problem. It'll cure me, right? I had been addicted since I was 13 years old. And now I'm in my 20s getting married. And I thought, yeah, this will do the trick. I promise to you, it does not.
Nope.
Right? It's not in the best interest of either of you to enter into a lifelong relationship commitment until and unless he can show long-term evidence of sobriety and real change. Right? I would say, here's what I tell my people who are thinking about getting married and there's addiction involved. I say, you know what? You need at least pretty close to a year of serious recovery effort, which includes at least 6 months of verifiable sobriety. Now, I know that sounds stern and maybe pretty rigid and crazy, but trust me, marriage is hard enough. And what happens is you get engaged and now, you know, you're starry-eyed and it's really cool. And your addiction can actually go away for a while. Mine did. Probably 6 or 8 months. It was non-existent because I was in the newness of marriage. It was incredible. It was amazing. And then the stress of life hit, right? Full-time job, full-time school, a kid on the way. And all the stress hit me. And where did Mark run back to? His old place of self-soothing and medicating. And all of it came back like a tidal wave right into the marriage. Don't bring that into the marriage. Give yourselves a chance, right? And look at these time frames and getting involved with something that is truly solid and real and lasting recovery plan with proven tools and processes, right? Don't just jump into the marriage and let the novelty and newness and excitement of that make you think that this is solved. Yeah. I just find so many are deeply disappointed. 6 months, a year, year and a half, 2 years into the marriage, like, oh crap, it's all back and then some.
Amen to that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, we could talk about this. We can talk about this forever, but we probably ought to wrap things up here. You know, one thing that we definitely want to say to this partner as we're getting close to the end here is please take a note from both Mark and I's bold, loving, caring spouses who, even though they didn't have the tools at the time and knew nothing about recovery, they did do one thing that we both thank God for, as hard as both of those days we just shared about today were. And that is our wives loved us enough those days, those hard, deep, dark days. They loved us enough to be honest with where they really were.
Yes.
And even though that was painful to hear, both of our spouses, in their case, from a place of desperation, had gotten to a point where they needed us to know just how bad things really were. And again, even though that was so hard for me to hear that from Brittany, my denial, my minimizing, my justification, just like Mark had convinced me that I was 300 feet from the edge of a cliff. When the reality is that I was hanging over the edge like cartoon style with, like, you know, the fingers like one by one, like breaking off. And that's really where we were. You are not doing your partner any favors by couching or minimizing where you are at. We understand the reasons why a spouse does that. You don't want to have the conflict. You don't want to push him into shame. We can't say much about this for sake of time, but the truth is never the wrong option in this case.
Yeah.
If he's going to make a choice about whether to really be empowered to make a choice of whether to be with you or not, because there's a lot at stake for both of you here, then he needs to know how dire the situation really is, if he doesn't already. Yeah. So please love him enough to tell him what he needs to hear, not what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. All right, everybody, man. This has been an intense episode, hasn't it?
Yeah, as everybody go watch a few episodes of Care Bears after this.
Yeah.
Be good. We really do love and appreciate all you guys. We appreciate you being here and for your patronage each week. We continue to just grow and grow, and we love getting your submissions. We love getting your feedback. Thank you for letting us know how the podcast impacts you. It really that is reward enough for us when we just hear how this is changing and impacting each of you. We really appreciate that, and it's good to hear that there are people out there engaged in the same fight that we're fighting every day. Again, if you'd like to enlist Mark and I in this fight, two long battle-hardened warriors who have done it all the wrong ways and now are pretty damn good, if I may say so myself, at doing it the right way. Please come check us out at daretoconnectnow.com. Grab your free 2-week trial. And if you would like to have something addressed on the podcast, admittedly briefly, we would love to get your submissions at pbsepodcast.com. There's a contact form right down at the bottom. You can go ahead and click on that and send us a submission. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for spending time with us. And we'll look forward to picking things back up in our next episode.
Have a great week, guys. Bye-bye. Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.